Yeah. This is DJ D&3, RadioSupa.com, off the cuff. Today we have a different experience.
Yes.
You know, I'm over here with my co-host Lisa Arenas
At ASU.
at ASU. And Lisa, what are we embarking on today or tonight?
We are supporting another Project Humanities event. And this is a simulation on what it's like in a practical environment to be an ex-offender, a convict.
Wow. And so we're going through like the whole process. They put us through the process of like, okay, you know, what it's like to be on probation, on parole or whatever. Limited resources,
felony
exactly.
record.
Yeah, so we got to go through the whole thing. So right now, you know what I mean?
Online getting ID.
Yeah, you need ID because what most have said, man, if I had ID, I wouldn't even need ID. But this is what we had to do. And they gave us this little starter package over here. And they gave us like different scenarios. You know, my name is Arnold. I have a criminal background of serving 7 years in a state prison for drug manufacturing and with intent to distribute. That's like what, WID or something like that?
No, that's just drug distribution.
Yeah, meth. So I've been selling meth, right? And only have a high school diploma. All right, so I have the following ID. I have a birth certificate and I have my social security card. All right. So I know, like, I used to work in corrections or halfway corrections and stuff. Right. You can't have more than like how much in your hand at the time, like $500 or something once you're.
Yeah, it depends on institution and state to state, but you're not allowed to be a regular person yet.
Yeah. Okay. So money on hand. Lisa's going to get her ID. I got $200 saved in prison. You know what I mean? Because I was working in the yard and all that stuff. I'm making like $120 a week, and I don't know. We're going to see how this thing goes, but this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to run a couple joints, play some music, and then we'll be back off the cuff. D&3, Lisa Arenas. We'll be right back, y'all.
So I am a student at ASU. So I started I heard about Project Humanities a lot as an organization on campus, and they do a lot of work that focuses on a lot of issues that people don't talk about these days, I feel like, or at least issues that are not talked about enough. And so I decided to do an internship with them, and then this was one of their bigger events that they were having earlier in the semester, which is the life after incarceration simulation. And so it's really interesting to see the work that they're doing, and it's important that the work that they're doing because it speaks for a lot of people that don't have voices, that are not being shared enough, or just not being heard throughout the society.
Right. Now, I'm looking at the stats on the numbers of the statistics and the numbers of people that are in prison in this country, and compared to like the rest of the world, don't you think that's a little
questionable?
Yeah. I mean,
why?
Right. Yeah. You have any thoughts on that?
I can't say that I know too much about it, but I definitely do know that within this society, the United States, it's definitely something that has a lot more population, and then the particular population that is in it is very questionable as well. And then compared to a lot of the other countries around the world, it's definitely the treatment of people in prison are way better than the treatment of people in prison in America. Right. So I mean, I don't have enough information to say that I can talk more about it, but it definitely is interesting to see, and why do we have that when America's supposed to be, this big democratic place, when there's other countries that are doing much better within the prison system than we are.
Exactly. So I mean, that leads to my next my next thought or so, because a lot of talk and a lot of, I guess, reporting of what they call the industrial prison complex comes about, where there's a lot of prison labor that are, that is being tied in with a lot of corporations. Yeah. And, you have any thoughts on that as well?
That's a big question.
I mean, it's a big question. I mean, you don't have to answer it.
It's loaded with a lot of information, and I don't think I have the capacity to speak on it.
Right.
In terms of like statistics and stuff like that, but it is really interesting to like have a conversation about it. And I think there's other people in here that might have a better.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's better like speech about it, but
But I mean, it's a thing that we have to come to terms with, that it is an existence.
Definitely. It needs to be people need to be aware about what's going on in the incarceration system, and like how it's played out, and like who's being targeted mostly, and like who's like being affected by it the most. Is definitely something, and that's why I think the simulation is cool, because people are starting to realize like, wow, this is tough, like this is hard, like people are going through this on a daily basis, and a particular set of people are going through this on a daily basis. So it's like, what can we do as Americans? What can we do like as a society to like better this system?
Right, this whole system and stuff. So like that, you have like the whole terminology of paying your debts to society, like doing your time. Yeah. But it just seems like, yes, you've done your time, but when you get out, it's pretty much
and it's not like they're giving back. It's like a lot of people can't find jobs after they get out.
Exactly.
A lot of people, even if it's like a minor thing, like just because you have that note on your under your name, on your government official ID or whatever it is, it's hard to like get back into the society after you're incarcerated or after you have that demeanor, and so it's tough. And I wish it was better.
Off the cuff, Lisa Arenas, she just came back with us.
I passed my UA test.
She passed it. I didn't. So, I got to go back on.
Are you the one who escaped? They're saying somebody absconded.
No, I didn't abscond, but But we'll be right back, y'all. Off the cuff, DJ DN3, Lisa Arenas. Corrections. I'm a computer guy. Yeah. So my job was, I was a computer instructor in the halfway house, and I helped ex-offenders with their resumes and how to use computers when they came out to the real world.
He builds my resume too.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah.
So, Sue, could you tell me a little bit about your background and how did you come into this program?
Well, I went to prison at 57 years old for securities fraud. Wow. And if you had told me what I was going to see and experience in prison, I would have said, oh, no, not in America. We don't treat people that way. This is not a third world country. And I was very wrong. We treat people horribly in prison. It's draconian. It is destructive. It's a huge waste of money because 95% of all prisoners get out. And if we do not prepare them for life, they're just going to go right back. We have a 60% recidivism rate in America. Yeah. So what people say, well, why should we do anything for inmates? They've committed a crime. I get that. That's a great question. But if we don't, we're going to build more prisons.
Right.
So our choice is, do we help people or do we build more prisons?
Set them up to fail, basically.
Yeah, set them up to fail. I mean, I don't think that's a great American choice. If we're all about family values, I think we need to help people rather than build more prisons.
That's supposed to be the Christian way, right?
It's
that we're
be.
Built on in America.
Yeah, that's right. It's supposed to be. But we're not doing a very good job as a role model. America is the incarceration nation. We have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated population. How is that even possible?
Wow.
And not to mention, it's corporate owned now. A lot of prisons are privatized. They're not even state-run DOC facilities. So it's for profit, prison for profit.
It's for profit. And you know what's scary about that is it's not just private prisons. They're now privatizing probation. So if you have a probation fee, they start charging you interest, and you never get off that merry-go-round.
Never coming back.
And so my fear is, what's next? Do we privatize police forces, and then you have a quota of arrest? Do you privatize the court system? Do you privatize executions? We can do it cheaper, faster, better. I mean, this is something that should never be privatized, ever.
Right.
Ever. Right.
It's not for profit. It should never be for profit. We cannot make money on the backs of human beings.
Right. So that's kind of equivalent to modern day slavery, not to mention the good 10 cents an hour they pay you for labor that you're mandated to do while you're in there, or you will go to the hole. My question is,
in some prisons they don't pay. Some states don't pay you
at all.
South Carolina doesn't pay.
Okay.
Wow.
My question is, in the time that you have been out and been home, what were the steps or the processes that allowed you to create this organization, and how much of a struggle has that been?
Oh, you know what? I envisioned a nonprofit when I was inside, and it certainly wasn't easy. I didn't know anything about nonprofits. just to form the nonprofit was very intimidating. It took me 2 years and a lot of help to do my first nonprofit. My second, we actually did in 9 days because we knew we knew what to do. But and also as a felon, who's going to hire me?
Right.
So I found out that the nonprofit world is much more accepting of people with a criminal record because it is almost to the advantage. We're like peer support. We have the experience. But when I walked into Perryville Prison, I knew I was blessed. I had an education.
And that is very rare in the prison population.
Well, it's not that. My friend Tom that was here tonight, he has a college education. Gail has a college education. My friend Diane has a master's. My friend Cindy has a PhD. I know a lot of women who have advanced degrees who were in prison, and for things like aggravated DUIs, they can't.
Well, that's right. I forgot. Arizona will send you to prison for DUI.
Yeah, they can't get a job now because it's forever.
Mandatory.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Wow.
It's a gift that keeps on giving. It never stops.
Wow. Now, you facilitated this event here at ASU, and I've heard you speak previously about facilitating the events at churches. And could you tell a little bit about, where you have been facilitating and what are your...
Yes, our most recent, I'm not going to name the churches because they might want privacy, but one of the churches was a Methodist church, and there were a lot of other churches that came to it because they wanted to, now they're going to have it at their churches. Right. And the most interesting thing was at the end of the third week, one of my volunteers came up to me and said, "Sue Ellen, somebody stole my Monopoly money," because we play money with this. And I said, "Really? Oh my goodness." And so when we brought this group back together, I was sternly looking at them from the front. I said, I am so disappointed in you all. You are church people. And I said, in the midst of all these fake criminals, we have a real criminal that stole Gabby's Monopoly money. And there was an intake of breath, and they all started clapping and applauding and cheering, congratulating each other. And I said, you see how quickly you have bonded and gone to the dark side.
Desperation brings out a whole different
Desperation and frustration and failure.
Right. And they weren't even ashamed of themselves.
And they weren't. They were like, yay. And tonight you heard people say my anxiety level went up. I was ready to cry. And it's not real.
Right.
It's pretend, but it's very powerful.
It is. I super appreciated the realistic perspective it gives on not only a specific task list, but a time frame to do it, a very limited budget, all the constraints that go along with it. And I do see that it did affect people.
And the lady that came, there was a lady that's been out 5 months, and she brought her children, and she said, now I understand. My children understand what I've been going through. Yeah. That is incredibly powerful. So I'm grateful for that.
Wow, Sue Ellen, thank you so much for that. And before we leave, I got your information. Could you tell everyone, I guess that's listening, on what sites they can go to or how they can reach you?
Well, we have a website at www.reinventingreentry.org, and I would love it on social media if you would like our Reinventing Reentry Facebook page, because we're trying to get to 1,000 followers, and also we're on Twitter at Reinvent Reentry. So I'm not a really good tweeter. I'm trying to learn that, but tweet for me about prison. Yeah. It's all the purpose is to educate people about who's in prison, what it's costing, how we can do better.
Exactly.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight and being a part of this.
Thank you for having us. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was very eye-opening.
And then I started doing international human rights work, focusing on gender-based violence, obviously against women, and also representing the Roma.
Wow, man. Now, I was hearing Sue Ellen saying that you actually practiced did some work in Russia. How was that experience?
I lived in Russia twice. I lived 2 years in Moscow in 98 to 2000, and then I lived 2 years in Vladivostok in 2007 to 2009. And the focus was different in each time, but the focus was always on gender-based violence. And we did do a lot of work, and we trained a lot of lawyers, we trained a lot of police and judges. However, the country's gone backwards, just as our country has gone backwards. Yeah. And the law that we got passed at the time regarding domestic violence has been repealed.
Oh, wow.
And now domestic violence in Russia is not domestic violence unless you are actually in the hospital.
Good Lord.
So basically, a husband's allowed to beat his wife.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the way it was when I went there. And we worked on this very specific law to change it in the Duma, which is their legislature. And we got it changed so that it was similar to ours. And now with Putin and how conservative and Orthodox, under Orthodox Church, that they have become, they have repealed it. And our work is,
How heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. It is very heartbreaking. I hate to say my work was no use because many women had positive benefits, and surely they know that there's another way. So even though they've gone backwards, just like our country's gone backwards, still our work isn't for naught. We have still done something in educating people.
Wow.
And maybe one day again they'll be able to use that and come back to fruit with it.
Well, that's the hope. I mean, our country's gone backwards too. We've had forward steps and backward steps and forward steps and backward steps. Right now we're in them backward steps.
Yes.
But that means we fight twice as hard, and it means we never give up.
So, as far as your experience in the United States, how long have you been working in a program like this, for life after prison reality?
Well, I actually began in law school doing a clemency project for battered women who were in prison in Wisconsin. That's where I went to law school. So I actually started that far back. I began my career as a corrections officer, actually. I have a degree in correctional administration, and I was a parole officer in California. That's where I actually started.
Okay.
So, I guess you could start back there. I decided, should I be a criminal or should I be a lawyer? Well, I decided to be a lawyer.
It's a little bit easier.
I think it was easier. Yeah, I would have been I wouldn't have done well in prison. So
you don't like
I
the
decided to
orange?
be a lawyer instead. I hate, it doesn't go well with the rest of the way I look. So, I started actually then, and then here when I worked at the Arizona Coalition Against Domestic Violence for a few years, we also did a clemency project. We weren't very successful, but we did do it. So off and on I've done different things. Now, to be intimately working on this has been really 6 years ago. We started the Arizona Justice Alliance, and we started working quite seriously on prison reform issues and for-profit prisons. I am a bomb against for-profit prisons.
Yes. Yeah.
I have spoken 300 times around this state in the last 6 years against for-profit prisons.
Anything that has profit involved is going to encourage the imprisonment, not to discourage
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. Well, and look, for-profit education is predatory education, and they give you bad education. For-profit medical services, look what you get.
They run your insurance dry.
They run your insurance dry, and you get bad treatment.
Yeah.
So any of that stuff, those are fundamental human rights, and they should not be for profit for anybody.
Yeah. Wow. Now,
powerful.
That's crazy. Now, how long have you been, working with Sue Ellen and with this?
Couple years, probably a couple of years,
Right.
2-3 years.
Okay.
So, what upcoming events or projects do you have that the public might be able to attend or get awareness?
Well, our next event is October 3rd. Our NOW chapter, National Organization for Women, is having a legislative and advocacy training. So we're gearing people up to understand how the legislature works for next session, which starts in January. And then also the advocacy training is about how do you plan a good advocacy campaign. If you want to plan a campaign against for-profit prisons, for example, or for a reentry issue or something like that, how do you plan a good one? Because you just fly into it, and often that is exactly what we do. We just start because we have a passion, and you need a passion, but you also need a plan.
Organization.
Yeah, and this is the second half of that training will be on how do you set up a plan with some very practical tools. So it's October 3rd. You can look it up. It's at the AFL-CIO offices.
Right.
And you can look it up online under the Central Phoenix Inez Casiano Now, NOW chapter.
All right, man.
Thank you so much for
Thank
your time.
you so
We had
much.
a wonderful experience tonight. I'm very glad we met you.
Great, I'm glad you came.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So we're going to go back and there's a couple more songs and all. And I think we should speak with Dr. Lester.
Come back with Dr. Lester.
Yeah, so off the cuff, DJ D and 3, Lisa Arenas, we'll be right back.
Ton of supposed programs to help, with reentry and all this. And honestly, at the end of the day, they really don't come to much. But this program was very impactful for people, and you could see it.
Well, I also had my reservations about simulations, and it's because it feels like it's artificial to me, and it feels like it could be a potential joke. I mean, we've done simulations for homelessness, and it's like, oh, I'm going to give you $1, I want you to go live in a box. That to me feels like it denigrates the gravity of that. So I approached this with some skepticism and needed to see what it would actually do. And I went around and I gauged the interest and the involvement of those, and most of the people were actually quite engaged with this in a serious way.
They
and
were.
If there's any way that we can create empathy, then it sort of underscores what we're trying to do with our Humanity 101.
I think people are so used to, monstrosizing, criminals, felons, that, like you said, they lack complete empathy because in their mind, why should I?
And it could never happen to anybody that I know.
Right, and I've met several people tonight that are completely surprising, and people commit all types of crimes, not necessarily murder or drugs.
That don't fit the
securities fraud, for instance, and things like that. So it was refreshing to see that.
And that's also what this program for that Humanity 101, we're talking about empathy and respect and compassion and forgiveness. And sometimes that's self-forgiveness too.
Right.
But you also have to recognize that there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on in terms of self-reflection here. And I think in terms of the self-reflection, I think there are lots of people who have a lot of myths. It's called dispelling the myths. What does it mean? And the statistics that were given tonight, the 60% recidivism, that's stunning to me.
I think that's actually kind of a low number. In the past, it's been up to like 80%.
Well, that's even worse. But what you can see, though, is how this becomes a business. And you can see why people are invested in having people return. But I think for me, just witnessing it sort of, this builds on a program that we had before. And that's when we first met Sue Ellen. It was really about recidivism specifically. And then the simulation follows that.
Okay.
And what we really looked at was, first of all, what kinds of resources are available when one has done their time, and the reality is not very much. And that there's a continual effort to sort of bring people back into a system. And I actually heard one person say tonight, she said, it was actually more comfortable being in jail because then I didn't have to make any decisions, didn't have to do anything.
You don't have to worry about being homeless. You don't have to worry about violating and all the frustration, disappointment.
But that's a sad commentary, though.
Yeah.
It is.
That's a sad commentary. It's almost like slaves comparing who has the better master.
Wow.
Well, it is almost modern day slavery, and that's, they like to call it a conspiracy theory, but if you really look at statistics, it is kind of going in that direction with the privatized prisons and all that.
Prison, and somebody's benefiting from this. Yeah. And if you provide no resources, and I think the other part that has connected me to this particular topic, I've had uncles, an uncle who was also in prison multiple times. But we are doing outreach to an adult homeless community, and we are actually trying to interview folks to figure out how we might connect them if they are ex-cons, or if they are veterans, or if they have other needs.
I'm sure there's got to be a nice-sized population.
It's a nice-sized population.
Wow.
And these are mostly males. These are mostly males. And so we may not be able to save them, but we are making a commitment to trying to connect them to resources. And there were some organizations here tonight that I was able to sort of add to our Rolodex of possibilities.
Nice.
So that, to me, is a success of the program, not necessarily how many people came, the spirit of those who were participating, the people who stayed, who participated in the conversation, who said, wow, I didn't know that.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
So, Dr. Lester, I'm looking at this stat sheet here.
Yes.
Okay, so first thing I'm gonna run off some numbers for the people. I'm gonna start from the bottom here. For every 100,000 people, Germany incarcerates 90. Every 100,000 people in France, they incarcerate 93. England incarcerates 153 people for every 100,000 people. Now we get to America, 763 people for 100,000 people. Could you?
That speaks volumes.
Yeah, could you shed some words on that?
Absolutely. My first reaction to that is that this is America, and America has a very distinct history from these other countries. But it's not distinct in a positive way. It's distinct in the sense that if you know anything about the history of policing and the KKK, it connects with the emancipation of black folks from enslavement. And when the police and the KKK were created, it was not to police criminals. It was because criminals would have been not just black folks, but this was to police black folks.
Yeah.
And so that has persisted today. And that's also why we would look at the injustice system and you see the black and brown people who are there.
I
It
wanna
can't
add
be
on
because
that
people
so
are just
bad.
inherently, criminal. It's because of an injustice system
Yeah.
where we can get off by having too much money. We call it affluenza. I have yet to see a person of color who can get off with something like that. That you've got so much money that you don't know right from wrong. So that's the history there. And people who refuse to look back at that history cannot and will not understand why these numbers look as they are. One story we heard tonight, just one, talked about the person who was wrongfully convicted. Did you hear
Years,
that?
yes, years.
Did you
and
hear
years.
that?
16
and
years.
he's not the first person.
No, not even close.
And we're not saying that people who aren't serving their time. What we're saying is that once you served your time, then you need to be able to serve your time and to come back into society
Clean.
and to be able to start afresh.
So, expounding on that, I have actually recently read some things, and it was saying that, like you were saying, from the roots of, the KKK and the police, and
they started about the same time.
yeah. So what it is they set up the justice system to specifically target, black, poor population people. Now there happens to be, a few more Caucasians than in the past, but it was designed literally to keep them down because they couldn't pass the slavery law anymore. So I read about it, and not a fiction book, like, an educated,
And a history book.
published book.
Right, a real history book.
And what they have physically done with our system is set up to fail. So they can't slave us legally.
Right.
So what they're doing is doing it by calling us felons
Right.
and taking away our voting rights and our rights to bear arms. So that in essence, you're still pretty,
enslaved.
you're minimum wage or less.
Right.
You're basically almost homeless. You're never with savings.
right.
So it is. It's set up that
Well,
way.
and keep in mind that we have instances and more data from situations like Ferguson and the ways in which the Department of Justice went in, investigated that, and clearly saw the injustices done to people who can least defend themselves.
Right.
And so if a society is built on stomping down on the least, then what does that make that society? I remember watching something the other day, and they were saying that if the only reason that you're tall is because somebody else is down on their knees, then how tall are you? So
Nice.
that's what I'm saying. I think it was Toni Morrison who says that when she's sort of dissecting white supremacy. She says this is the essence of white supremacy.
Nice.
And it doesn't have to be about calling somebody the N-word. It can be an injustice system where a judge
belittling
says...
people.
It's belittling people. It's thinking that you're better.
Right.
And then the problem with that is when the people who are stepped on then start internalizing that and thinking they're not any better than that.
Which happens over time and repetition.
Absolutely. If you've been beat down, then you accept that beating down. And I'm saying the people in Ferguson, and it was not just the police, it was the municipal court system, fining them for not being able to pay their fines. And over again. And
How
then
do you get away from that?
Well, and then you look at, well, that's what people were saying here is I can't afford to do this, so I get stuck in jail again. These are people who, right this moment in St. Louis, are protesting. And people are asking, Black lives matter, all lives matter. You say, well, if you look at your history, it hasn't always mattered. Women's lives haven't mattered. Poor people's lives haven't mattered.
Right.
So it's nonsense. That's what this is. The numbers that you point out are the numbers that define America.
And let's not forget this nice quote by Albert Einstein. A problem cannot be solved with the same consciousness that created it.
Yep. Well, and I say this because people after Charlotte were knocking on my door and sending emails and wanting me to come in and talk about a solution. And I kept saying, well, what's interesting about the optics of this is that these are white people now. These are people who are really rising up against anti-Semitism because the racism has been there.
Right.
So I said, once white people talk to themselves and among themselves about racism, then call me. Call me to let me know what you're already doing because I didn't start the problem and I can't solve
Fix it, yeah.
And that, to me, is the essence of any effective ally. I need to do that when I see sexism and homophobia and all those other isms. It's not for me to be complacent. I have to be not only empathetic, but also respectful and have some integrity, some moral integrity. And I think that's what seems to be missing here is moral integrity. It's not about me, but it is about you. So that's
Well,
really
and in
about
the long
allies.
run, it affects us because everything around us affects our daily lives.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Well, but if you live in a bubble of privilege, though, then it's really not about you.
I wish.
Well,
Or maybe not. I guess it
we
builds
all have
character,
privilege.
right?
We all have privilege. At the same time, we don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Now we look at it in a intersectionally, but we all have privilege. If we were able to walk through that door without the use of crutches or, can hear them
Or a
without
guard
hearing
popping a lock.
Exactly. Then we have privilege. But what we're talking about here is these multiple ways in which we don't use the privilege we have. And that's what I say about allies. White people started racism, James Baldwin says it, and white people have to end it.
And they did it to keep us divided, y'all.
That's right. Well, and it's kind of like the prison system. Somebody benefits from this. It's the same way that people benefit from, pink toys and blue toys. Somebody benefits from that. Because if you mix them all together, people are like, I don't know what I should get. Should I get him this or get him that? But now somebody tells you what to get.
A defined standard.
So when you go down to the baby shop at the hospital, you just grab a blue thing because it's a boy. You don't have to think about it. So that's what the problem is when we stop thinking.
Just being
And
on
that's
automatic.
scary. You're on automatic.
Wow. And we can talk about this all night. Dr. Lester.
It's going in all kinds of directions.
No, but this is great. This is great. Thank you for having us. Another quality project, Humanities project. And also, we're just, us at Radio Supa, we're just down to, support in any type of way.
Well, and thanks for the stuff that y'all continue to do, too, because I'm always singing your praises. I did it tonight. I said, these are conscious folks.
Oh,
There's
thank
so
you.
many people who are still sleeping, but these folks are wide awake.
Yeah, no, we love to do stuff like this.
Wide
So,
awake.
of course, we'll be back eventually.
Absolutely. Come on back.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much for your
Thank
time
you.
again.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to end this show off, right? All right. Off the cuff.